When you hear about the Nazis, what comes to mind? The recruiting of former Nazis was not without controversy. Over the years, we have debated on whether or not the U.S. intelligence recruited or were infiltrated by the Nazis. Why was that the case? What did they help with, and what did they get in return? Following Nazi Germany's defeat in World War II, the U.S. was apprehensive about the likelihood of Soviet infiltration into American intelligence services. As part of Operation Paperclip, the U.S. government recruited former Nazi scientists and intelligence operatives after World War II. Some of these are known to have worked for intelligence agencies such as the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, and the National Security Agency, the NSA. The initiatives attempted to put their talents in rocketry, nuclear physics, and intelligence collection to use to advance American interests. Some members of the U.S. administration and military opposed the program, claiming that it was unethical to work with those who had committed war crimes and human rights violations. Despite these reservations, Operation Paperclip was carried on for several years, and many former Nazis were able to establish successful careers in American intelligence organizations. Some of the recruited Nazis had committed war crimes and human rights violations, but their background was hidden and they were awarded immunity. Their extent of the role in American intelligence is unknown, but it is known that they contributed significantly to the establishment of the Cold War-era military-industrial complex. Former SS commanders and Gestapo members are among the most noteworthy former Nazis recruited into American intelligence. During the Cold War, the U.S. administration rationalized their recruitment by arguing that they possessed significant information and skills that might be used to counter the imagined danger posed by the Soviet Union. The U.S. government has released some information about Operation Paperclip in recent years, but the exact extent of former Nazis' cooperation in American intelligence remains undisclosed. Overall, the U.S. government's recruitment of former Nazis raises ethical concerns about using individuals who committed war crimes and human rights violations for intelligence objectives, as well as the extent to which their background was concealed from the American public. By giving amnesty and concealing their past, the U.S. government was essentially sheltering those who perpetrated atrocities against humanity. They also sparked concerns about the possible impact of former Nazis on American politics and behavior. Some of the former Nazis hired had committed war crimes and human rights violations, but their past was kept hidden and they were rewarded immunity. They were able to obtain high-level positions within American intelligence agencies where they could wield significant power. This enabled them to promote their ideology and propaganda, and some even used their positions to gather intelligence for the Nazi cause. The U.S. government has released some information about Operation Paperclip in recent years, but the exact extent of former Nazis' cooperation in American intelligence remains undisclosed. The subject is still contentious and the subject of ongoing arguments and investigations. That is, until accounts of a 600-page report, which the Justice Department has been attempting to keep secret for 4 years, was released. The report contains fresh evidence in more than a dozen of the most notorious Nazi prosecutions of the last 3 decades. The report's most incriminating revelations concern the Central Intelligence Agency's cooperation with Nazi émigrés. Previous government studies and scholars had confirmed the CIA's employment of Nazis for post-war intelligence objectives. However, this research goes a step farther in demonstrating the extent of American cooperation and deception in such operations. According to the Justice Department study, which describes the government's collusion with persecutors, OSI investigators determined that some Nazis were indeed intentionally permitted entry to the United States, despite the fact that the government officials were aware of their past. America, which took pleasure in being a safe haven for the persecuted, became, to some tiny degree, a safe refuge for persecutors as well, the report stated. Since the formation of the OSI, which was amalgamated with another unit last year, more than 300 Nazi persecutors have been deported, stripped of citizenship, or barred from entering the United States. The report cites assistance provided by CIA officials in 1954 to Otto von Balschwing, an associate of Adolf Eichmann, who helped develop the initial plans to purge Germany of Jews, and later who worked for the CIA in the United States in chronicling the cases of Nazis who were aided by American intelligence officials. CIA officials deliberated in a series of documents what to do if von Balschwing was asked about his background, whether to deny any Nazi involvement or explain it in a way on the basis of extenuating circumstances, according to the article. After learning about von Balschwing's Nazi affiliations, the Justice Department attempted to deport him in 1981. He died that year at the age of 72. The investigation also looks into the case of Arthur L. Rudolph, a Nazi physicist who was in charge of the Mittelwerk weapons facility. He was brought to the United States in 1945 as part of Operation Paperclip. Nazi has recognized Rudolph and credits him as the father of the Saturn V rocket. According to the investigation, a 1949 document from the Justice Department's No. 2 official asked immigration agents to allow Rudolph to return to the country following a stopover in Mexico, stating that failure to do so would be to the prejudice of the national interest. The report claims that, contrary to what Rudolph and American intelligence officers had claimed, there was evidence that he was far more actively involved in Middleworks slave exploitation than had previously known to the Justice Department investigators. When the Justice Department sought to deport him in 1983, some intelligence officers complained, but the OSI saw it as a validation of the depth of the government's commitment to the Nazi prosecution program, according to internal memos. The investigation found that the Justice Department occasionally concealed information that American officials had about Nazis in this nation, asserting that searches of CIA and FBI records turned up no information about Charon Subsakov's Nazi's past. Persecutors submitted a motion in 1980 that misstated the facts. In reality, the Justice Department knew that Subsakov had advised the CIA of his SS link after he arrived in the United States, according to the report. After the case was dropped, extremist Jewish groups called for Mr. Subsakov's death by bomb at his residence in Paterson, New Jersey in 1985. It's crucial to remember that other countries joined the U.S. in this effort. Surprised? These German scientists were sought out after by the Soviet Union, Britain, and France in particular. The establishment of Operation Paperclip would be encouraged and justified by a technical rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union, highlighted by the space race and Cold War. In the autumn of 1945, German scientists started to arrive in America, although not all of the hired were Nazis or SS officers. The most well-known and respected ones were, having worked closely with Hitler or influenced Nazi party figures like Heinrich Himmler and Hermann Göring. Werner von Braun, a rocket engineer who served as director of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, was instrumental in creating the Redstone, the nation's first ballistic missile, and later the Saturn V rocket. As a Nazi thinker and SS member, he visited Buchenwald concentration camp and handpicked captives to work for him as laborers, Jacobson told NPR in 2014. The German Air Force Institute of Aviation Medicine, run by physiologist and medical researcher Hubertus Strughold, was well known for performing torturous medical examinations on prisoners at the Dachau concentration camp. Strughold asserted that he was unaware of any such activities before the war, but at a conference where their findings were presented in October 1942, he was listed as one of 95 physicians. He is widely regarded as the father of space medicine. He was the chief scientist of the aerospace medical branch of Brooks Air Force in the United States and is widely regarded as the founder of space medicine. Walter Schreiber, a former Nazi officer, oversaw horrifying bioweapons-based medical experiments that killed countless people. Despite having defected to America, he was eventually captured by the Soviets. Prior to settling down at the Air Force School of Aviation Medicine in Texas, Jacobson claims he worked for a number of federal agencies. Von Braun, Strughold, and other Nazis dispatched to the United States would never be held accountable for their crimes, despite the fact that Schreiber would later testify at the Nuremberg trials. Operation Paperclip was a closely kept secret for the duration of the Cold War. Overall, the hiring of former Nazis by the U.S. government raises serious ethical questions about the morality of using people who have committed war crimes and human rights violations for intelligence purposes, as well as about how much of their background was hidden from the American public. It also highlights the dangerous consequences of sacrificing moral principles for the sake of national security. Nevertheless, Operation Paperclip's legacy is still being looked into and discussed, and it serves as a cautionary tale about the repercussions of working with people who have a history of committing crimes. What do you think? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments section.